Everyone is Hi, and I want to welcome back all of you who've been joining us this semester for our series Eating the Past. It's been a joint collaboration between USU's Merrill Cazier Library and the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. And I want to welcome any of you who are joining us for the first time. I'm Jennifer Duncan. I'm the head of Utah State University Special Collections and Archives, and I'm the curator who oversees our book collection. This is our last episode for the 2021 school year, but if you stay tuned until the end, we will be announcing our plans for next fall. And I again want to thank Tammy Proctor, head of the USU History Department, for helping us sponsor this series and doing the lion's share of the coordination this spring. And I also want to give a huge shout out to Jonah Bebo, who has organized all of the Scholar Cooks, produced all our video, helped manage our Zoom, and generally just been a really wonderful, pleasant person who's cheerfully kept us on track every month. We really honestly could not have done it without your technical skills, Jonah, and your good spirit. So thank you very much for making all 8 Cooks projects look so great. As a reminder, our Zoom series focuses on recipes taken from the cookbook collections here at Utah State University, which we use not only to document the history of the Intermountain West, but also to provide broader primary source literacy through the study of foodways and culinary history. All previous events have been posted to a library guide on our website. Jonah, I meant to give you that link. So if you could go dig it out, or maybe I'll do that once Jeannie starts talking. We'll put the link to that guide in our chat so that you can go and see any of the previous presentations or find out about the other books or recipes at your convenience. So tonight, we are going to be hearing from 2 USU scholars, both from the Department of History. First up will be Jeannie Sur, who's business manager for both the History Department and Utah Public Radio. And she's going to be talking about cooking with gelatin. And then Dr. Victoria Grieve, a scholar of visual culture in the Cold War era, will talk to us about Alice Waters, Chez Panisse, and the origins of the farm to table movement. Both of these 2 are amazing cooks, so we are in for a real treat tonight. Thank you both for joining in the fun and cooking for us tonight. And so Tammy, if I can get my first slide up, I will introduce Jeannie's cookbook. Great. Okay, so tonight, Jeannie will be cooking a molded avocado and tuna from the Knox On Camera Recipes, a completely new guide to gel cookery, which was produced by the Knox Gelatin Company out of Johnstown, New York. For those of you who have been watching our series, you'll remember that last month we left off in 1961 with Julia Child's Mastering the Art of French Cooking. The recipe that Jeannie has prepared for us tonight in many ways exemplifies the tradition of cooking that Julia was reacting to. But I want to note that her cookbook for tonight is actually, it's 1 year later than that, Mastering the Art of French Cooking. It's from 1962. This cookbook is really more of a pamphlet. It's bound 48-page publication. And some of you may wonder why a special collections would have something like this. And it's actually a perfect example of some of the more ephemeral items that are now passing through the rare book trade to both collectors and institutional buyers. So USU has a fair number of this type of thing. It's more akin to promotional or commercial publication from an industrial food producer, in this case, Knox Gelatin. Knox was a New York company, as I mentioned. It's run by Charles and Rose Knox. In 1889, they developed a special method for producing gelatin. And their marriage and business relationships really displayed a startling quality for the time that they were living in. In fact, it was really Rose's thrifty household economy that allowed the 2 of them to save enough money to purchase the gelatin factory in the first place. And she really became instrumental to the success of the business. As early as the 1890s, she was authoring Knox cookbooks, like the later one we have in our collection, to promote the use of gelatin to homemakers. And after her husband's death in 1908, she took over his job at the factory for herself, and she became really progressive in supporting her women employees. She fired an executive who said he wouldn't work for a woman, and she immediately changed all kinds of policies that had made it difficult for women to work there. She established a 5-day work week. She implemented 2 weeks of paid vacation and paid sick leave. So she's really a pioneer. Excuse me. Rose promoted and marketed her business through recipes and cookbooks until she handed over the business to her son in 1947. But she continued to serve on the board of directors until her death in 1950 at the age of 92. If I can get the next slide. Let's see. Yes. So this is the Special Collections and Archive cookbook that Jeannie is going to use tonight, the one on the right-hand side of the screen. And you can see that the Knox company was still trying to market their product to a modern cook and was explicitly using the television set to evoke that sense of the new. This item seems a little confusing because it really doesn't have anything at all to do with making recipes camera ready or filming the end product of your cooking. Rather, it's just hearkening to this new trend of cooking TV shows, which were really nothing like what we see today. They were very popular, but they were definitely much blander, certainly in contrast to what we saw with Julia Child, who was dramatic, enthusiastic, and not afraid of a mess. If I can get my last slide here. So really, in fact, at this time, the cooking shows often would just show a woman's hands preparing the food. There's no surprise, no drama. It was all very sanitized. So this book looks like TV cooking show of its time. But there's also this really other weird thing that I discovered about this cookbook, which is that TV albums were actually a popular thing in the 1950s and 1960s. They were pitched at men in magazines like Popular Photography. So when I say a TV album, I mean, it was a thing to take pictures of your TV and print those out and put them into a photo album. So this little cookbook is actually capitalizing on a bunch of trends of its time, TV watching, TV cooking, and TV albums. And all of those things are evoking the idea of the modern, and I suppose maybe the modern idea of cooking with gelatin. So I'm gonna hand the time over to Jeannie now, and you can see on this screen the cookbook version of the recipe that she's prepared. Oops, Tammy went back. Her recipe's on the left. And then Jeannie's gonna talk to us about cooking with gelatin. So there you go, Jeannie.
Thank you, Jennifer. So yeah, I want to first say that when I was interested in this project and I was talking with Tammy Proctor about it, I asked for recipes that would kind of be unappealing or things that we think of as unappealing. And so initially I had wanted to do mayo desserts. And so that's how I came to this recipe, is that I was really looking at desserts that had a lot of mayo in it. And so a lot of the recipes in this cookbook also have a lot of mayo. But as I was cooking and thinking about these recipes, what really caught my eye was actually the Jello aspect of it. So welcome to Jello land. Next slide, Tammy. Yeah, so I'm just gonna give a brief history of Jello. So first of all, contrary to popular belief, Jello is not made from horse hooves. Horse hooves contain keratin, and so Jello is gelatin, and it is produced from collagen, and the collagen is extracted from boiling animal skin, bones, and connective tissue. Nowadays, the modern Jello gelatin is most likely produced from pig skin or cow skin, so that's what it's made from. There are early references to gelatin, so you can find this in France and England and Scotland, but it was really hard to make. It was time consuming. It was mostly for the nobility, and that was partly because you needed a large kitchen staff to make it. So I have kind of a description from the procedure from 1747. So it says, take out the great bones of 4 calves' feet and put the feet into a pot with 10 quarts of water, 3 ounces of hartshorn, 3 ounces of Ingles glass, a nutmeg quartered, 4 blades of mace. Then boil this till it comes to 2 quarts and strain it through a flannel bag. Let it stand 24 hours, then scrape all the fat from the top, very clean, then slice it and put it to the whites of 6 eggs beaten to froth, boil it a little, and then strain it again through a flannel bag. Then run the jelly into little high glasses. And at this point, you can add orange flower, wine, sugar, and things of that sort. So Again, it was really for nobility, for those who were rich, because you needed large kitchen staff to be able to make gelatin. And so I think Thomas Jefferson was really into gelatin. And again, he took that, from inspiration from France. All right, so, but what you see in the 1890s is Charles and Rose Knox, who Jennifer talked about. They are credited with discovering granulated gelatin, which made the process much easier. So there were kind of steps along this way that made it a little bit easier and easier, but they're really credited with making the modern gelatin packets that you find now. So as Jennifer spoke about Rose Knox, who's a very interesting person, and she published Dainty Desserts, which popularized gelatin. Also in 1890s, you see this cough syrup maker, Pearl Waite. He branded the name Jello. So he sold that company. It actually went through a couple companies, and now it's owned by Kraft Heinz. So gelatin, the Jello brand, is what is well known today. Next slide, Tammy. All right, so yeah, Charles Knox promoted gelatin at the World's Fair. You see just kind of popularity of gelatin in advertising. But really, the rise of gelatin, Jello, is really kind of the rise of, is following like American social history and advertising. So what you're seeing is domestic science, you're seeing changing kitchens, you're seeing modern kitchens. And so Jello really became this fashionable, modern way to cook. So you find it in advertisements of Ladies' Home Journal. What's interesting to me is that this connection of food, arts, and it being a very feminine art. So, molded foods. It really rose in popularity in the interwar period and also even Depression era as a way to really increase, let your longevity of your food, not longevity, but to stretch out your ingredients. So you can add things to it and then add Jello. It also was a way to get like nutrients, people thought, because it is made, with animal products. So not only was it to stretch out your ingredients, but then you can really have something fancy at the same time. In the 1930s, you see the introduction of lime flavored Jello, which is still popular to this day. In the 1950s, Jello shots were invented. And in the 60s is really where we come to the Knox on-camera recipes. So the one that I am cooking out of. I would say, Jello really hit its peak in the 60s and maybe even part of the 70s. And then at that point is where you really kind of see a decline. Especially, I would say, the savory Jello. So the kind of recipes that you see in the Knox cookbook and the ones that kind of hit its peak, which was all about like Jello salads. So Jello salads was really big. Again, Jello really kind of captured that modern kitchen, or the way that people thought about, what the future kind of looked like. So it was really orderly, economical. So the salad, it was really in form, it was clean, it didn't like spill out into your plates. But again, with in the 70s, you really see changing kitchens in America, and you see women hit the workforce. So that's where you see the kind of decline of the savory Jello and the rise of the dessert and sweet Jello. So that's kind of a general history of Jello. Jonah, do you want to play the first video? So now I will show you my actual recipe, the molded tuna and avocado.
Welcome to Jeannie's Kitchen. Today I'll be showing you how to make the Knox on-camera molded avocado and tuna. This dreamy 2-layered dish has great eye appeal and divine combination of flavors. So this recipe starts with the molded Jello avocado, and it is usually made, it is traditionally made in a 9x5 dish, but because this dish is supposed to have great eye appeal, I will be making it in this fish Jello mold. To begin with the first layer, we will start by mashing the avocado. Oh, and before actually you start the avocado, you are supposed to make the Jello, which is right here, and it is supposed to be chilled until it becomes a consistency of egg whites. So once the avocado is mashed, you add sour cream and mayo. Yum. Okay, and then on top of that, you add lemon juice, salt, and a dash of Tabasco. Remember, the Tabasco will change the color of the avocado, so keep that in mind. So for the Jello mold, I will be spraying it with ham. And once all the ingredients are in, then you will add the chilled Jello. Mix it all together, and then you pour it into your mold. Chill it until it becomes firm. In this case, I have pre-made an avocado Jello layer in the 9x5 dish, so I can show you the second step. So for the tuna Jello layer, you will be adding the dissolved Jello, lemon juice, salt. You'll be mixing this and slightly chilling. So then you add 3/4 cup of water, and then you add the rest of the ingredients, which would be the tuna, celery, and pimento. Amazing colors. So once this Jello is made, you will then pour it onto your avocado mold. And remember, with fancy ingredients, you must also be eye appealing yourself.
Fantastic. All right, so the last part of the story of Jello is that Jello really has a close relationship with Utah. So if you Google Jello, or if you just look at Jello, look at articles on Jello, there's a lot on the Jello belt in the Mormon corridor. So that is what's said. So there is this quote from the Los Angeles Times. It says, Salt Lake City is America's Jello eating capital. Every man, woman, and child in Salt Lake City buys 2 boxes of the stuff annually, or twice the national average, says Mary Kincaid of Jello brand Kraft Foods. Utah residents also eat twice as much lime Jello as anyone else on the planet. So again, this really close relationship with Jello. As you can see, Senator Mike Lee has Jello with the senator. I don't really know how often he does this. And then in 2001, Senator Blackham proposed a resolution urging Jello recognition. So next slide, we can see that resolution. I just, I find this to be really adorable. And it's a lot of text, but you can see that that gelatin was introduced in 1897. Utah was admitted the year after. So obviously the rise of Jello and the rise of Utah came hand in hand. You can kind of see, what recipes the Beehive State loves with Jello, bananas, apples, marshmallows, pretzels. You can also see there was a Winter Olympics, Salt Lake City Winter Olympics pin that had Jello. And then, Des Moines, Iowa, the second column, almost edged out Salt Lake City as a capital of Jello, and that must have, that made Utahns angry. So we are rallying to take back the title of the Jello capital, I guess, of the US, of the world. So yeah, this resolution was to support Jello as favorite snack of Utah. And Jonah, can we play the second part of my video? So you can now see the resolution of my recipe.
Welcome back to Jeannie's kitchen. I will be showing you now the finished product. All right, so step number 1 is to make sure you change into your dinner outfit out of your cooking outfit, as I have done. Secondly is to get your Jello molds out of the refrigerator. I have heated the bottom a little bit with warm water to see if that will help jiggle the Jello mold out. So, all right, so this is the avocado and tuna Jello layer in the 9x5 pan that the recipe calls for. So this has been heated, and now the final reveal. Let's see here. Ooh, all right. Okay, so as you can see, the 2 layers are beautiful. At this point, the next step is to make sure it looks beautiful to garnish with avocado. The recipe says to also decorate with olives. I unfortunately do not have any olives, so to make it beautiful, you can add some broccolini. All right, and then for the fish Jello mold, the decorative fish Jello mold, unfortunately, the first one I made did not work out. It was a flop. So this one was made before about an hour ago, and we're going to see if this actually works. This one is the Jello mold with mayo, and it's just for decorative purposes. Alrighty, let's see here. Ooh, all right. Here we go. It did not quite set, but again, it's just for decorative purposes. So we just improvise, and you will now decorate around it. So here is the finished dish, the avocado and tuna.
All right, so that was my dish. I have to say a couple things about it. One, which is that it didn't quite look like the picture. I did do the proportions as stated, but it wasn't as high. So I figured that to actually make it look like the picture, you might have to double the recipe. Another thing is that because it was TV ready, which meant that they just took photos of it, the recipe didn't have a lot of details. Details such as how long the Jello had to set for, and parts of it were actually a little bit confusing. So I know that the format was to make it beautiful, but it didn't necessarily help in the cooking process. Also, I know that a lot of presenters here, have made delicious dishes and have said that they wish that there was like smell television so that everyone could smell and enjoy it. And I also wish that there was smell television during mine because I would like to share the pain with everyone. It smelled disgusting. I don't think I quite ever understood that unflavored gelatin is very meat-like. So it did have this kind of animal product smell to it. I did taste the Jello mold, the molded avocado and tuna, and it, it was pretty disgusting. I think that when you encase all those ingredients with Jello, it just adds like meatiness to it. And so the tuna not having kind of, I mean, it had some pimento, but without it having onions or things of that sort to kind of offset the fishy and animalness of it, it just was really overwhelming. So yeah, it was not the biggest success that I've ever had, and I really only was able to take one bite before it was overwhelming. So yeah, it didn't turn out quite as I hoped. Also, in that video, the Jello fish mold was not a success. So, as a surprise to everyone here, I actually did make another mayo fish mold, which I have here. And it is also made with mayo. Last time I actually put one Jello packet in it, and I didn't quite felt like it was firm enough. So I ended up putting 3 Jello packets in it, this one. And you can see this is the white for the mayo. And as a surprise, I added pimento, which once I put in, I realized was sinking all the way to the bottom. So this will be a big surprise because we will see what the pimento looks like with the mayo mold. And so here, I'm going to move my camera. It actually moves down, and we are going to see if we can get a better Jello mold. Okay. Ooh. And like last time, I did heat it with a little hot water. Wow, that looks quite disgusting. But here we go. Yes. A live Jello mold unveiling. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jeannie. That was totally awesome. That was truly the best. I just want to tell you that as I was doing research for this, I was reading a book about, or a chapter in a book about the Knox Jello. The Knox Jello book. And it was about that and Julia Child combined together. And it commented that Julia Child was so new for cooking because she wasn't afraid to demonstrate her mistakes and to kind of tell the people, oh, look, I screwed this up and here's what you can do to fix it. So I think you brought a Julia Child approach to your Jello cooking. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much. Yes, I appreciate that.
Okay. All right, we are going to transition to something very different. We're going to transition to Victoria Grieve, who will be cooking tonight from Alice Waters' Chez Panisse Pasta, Pizza, and Calzone. That was Waters' first cookbook, and it focuses on some of the items from the upstairs cafe part of the very famous Chez Panisse restaurant in Berkeley, California. USU has a signed first edition of this title. It's in its original jacket, which you can see here on the left side of the screen. More than any other book that we've looked at this semester, this one really resembles a modern cookbook that you might go buy for yourself at Barnes & Noble. Even 37 years later, it is so beautifully designed and the recipes really appeal to a modern palate. In fact, all the books and promotional materials, the menus, the posters, everything that supports and promotes the Chez Panisse restaurant are just as beautiful as the food that you might eat there. You're going to get to see a sample of that tonight. Alice Waters worked with Berkeley artists to design her printed material, and it all really bears a very distinctive style. So in this particular image, the image of Alice Waters down there in the corner, you'll see 2 of her collaborators on this first project. Patricia Curtin, she originally cooked at Chez Panisse, but really she's a professional printer and designer. And Curtin has designed most every one of the Chez Panisse cookbooks to this day. And the other woman in this photograph is named Martine Lebreau. Tammy, if I can get the next slide. So this particular cookbook is a little different from most of the subsequent ones. It includes these really lovely watercolor paintings by this Martine Lebreau, who, according to the dust jacket, lived and cooked in Provence, and she contributed some Provençal recipes to this cookbook. I searched and searched and searched, and I really could not find much additional information about this woman. But really, the images are absolutely charming. And you're going to get a close-up of the image of the pasta garden, which is here in Victoria's presentation. It is just, it's almost worth coming into special collections to get to look at this little pasta garden yourself. Next slide. And then the other person I wanted to mention is David Lance Goines, and he didn't actually contribute to this cookbook, but he printed all kinds of materials for the Chez Panisse restaurant. And essentially his style defined the restaurant's visual brand. So any of you who are familiar with Chez Panisse, as you look at these, you'll be like, oh yeah, that looks really familiar to me. So I feel kind of compelled to mention him because he's actually a very well-known printer. He's from Berkeley. He's a fine press printer. He works on an American Type Foundry offset press that he's used since 1966. And Berkeley is actually known for its many fine press printers. In fact, the USU Library collects a lot of materials from Berkeley fine press printers. And Goines himself founded a press called the St. Hieronymus Press in 1968. His design and style bears a really strong resemblance to the Art Nouveau style of the 1890s. So Goines and Waters were actually a couple when the restaurant first opened, but they've remained friends over the years. And on this slide, you see several of his poster designs for the Chez Panisse restaurant from over the years. The second image in this line here of 4 is actually a small fine press reproduction of the very first poster that Goines designed for Alice Waters when the restaurant opened. And USU actually owns a 1973 edition that we have in a poster portfolio produced by the St. Hieronymus Press in 1973. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Victoria Grieve, who can tell us more about the farm to table movement and all of the beautiful foods that are associated with it.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And I also want to thank Tammy for launching this project, and for Jonah Bebo, as Jennifer thanked you for all of your hard work and editing, and to my 2 assistants, Nathan, my videographer, and Naomi, my kitchen assistant, who you will meet soon. So when you hear the name Alice Waters, you will often hear the name, you hear the word revolution mentioned in the same breath. And whether or not you've heard of her, she is in fact one of the most influential culinary figures in the United States in the past half century. She's synonymous with her restaurant, Chez Panisse, from which she launched this delicious revolution. Next slide, please. Waters was born to a middle-class family in New Jersey. She briefly attended UC Santa Barbara, transferred to Berkeley in the fall of 1964. And she majored in French cultural studies there. And in the summer between her sophomore and junior year, she studied abroad in France. And she described this in lots of different interviews. She was awakened. She had an aha moment. She was utterly astounded that people bought fresh bread every day, that the markets were filled with fruits and vegetables like you see here that had been grown by local farmers and picked that very morning. She was astounded by the sort of cultural importance of preparing food and cooking food and eating food in community. And she was determined to eat the same way when she returned to the United States. Next slide, please. So when Waters returned to Berkeley, the student movement was in full swing at that point, and Waters became involved in the free speech movement at Berkeley. And if you know anything about 60s politics, you know that there were a lot of meetings and a lot of gatherings and sit-ins and teach-ins where people talked and talked about social problems and political issues and about solutions to those problems and how to organize. And this is really influential for Waters. But the way that she participated most fully in the movement was by feeding all of the friends who showed up at her house to talk. And so she would feed them and they would drink wine and they would talk and they would talk and they would talk. And she loved this, right? But she wanted to cook in the same way that she had learned about in France. And she found that this was nearly impossible. Now, if you watched Laura Gelfand's Eating the Past episode with Julia Child, you know that Julia Child said that every American could learn to cook like the French. But that meant something really different to Alice Waters. She wasn't interested in crepe Suzette, I know, crazy, or fancy French menus, but she was really just drawn to how ordinary French people bought and prepared and ate real food with market fresh ingredients, seasonal ingredients, and very simple recipes, if at all, and a rather rustic presentation, which is in very distinct contrast to what Jeannie was just describing about this very visually appealing, sort of neatly plated food. She was not interested in that. Okay, next slide, please. So for Waters, a cook can be only as good as her ingredients. And in the United States in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the lettuce in the grocery stores was iceberg lettuce that could be stored and shipped across the country. Tomatoes were picked long before they were ripe, so they too could be shipped across the country. Americans ate canned fruits and vegetables. There's our Jello that tastes just like fresh fruit, right? And so, you know, American society was enamored with prepackaged convenience foods that were preserved and that they were frozen, and that, according to Waters, were absolutely tasteless. So with that, let's watch the first video clip. Okay, today we are making Chef Panice's spring shallot, red onion, and leek papperdelle. So for our ingredients, and Alice Waters would tell you that the ingredients are the most important part of any recipe. She said that, you know, a cook is only as good as their ingredients. So the more local, the freshest ingredients that you can get, the better. Ideally, you would go out to your home garden and pull your ingredients from there and bring them in to cook. But since it's March in northern Utah, I did the next best thing and went to our local organic market for yellow and red onions, shallots, garlic, leeks, and some fresh thyme. This is what I had from my garden, which is just a little bit of garlic that had overwintered. Other than the onions, the only other ingredients are Italian parsley for a garnish, vegetable broth, local butter. Here in Cache Valley, we have our own creamer that makes butter and cheese and milk and ice cream. So we got local butter. And this is some fresh handmade pasta set aside just for us by Chef Barney at Crumb Brothers Artisan Bread. So shout out to Barney, thank you so much. We'll be back in a few minutes to put this all on the stove. Okay, thank you. So it was Waters' desire to kind of create a certain kind of food. It was from that desire that Chez Panisse was born. Not long after Waters graduated from Berkeley, the restaurant opened its doors. It still occupies the same place, this old house on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley. It was 1971. Waters was 27. And she had literally no experience whatsoever as a chef, as a restaurant owner, or as a business person. But that did not stop her. She wanted Chez Panisse to be the sort of easygoing, unpretentious gathering place where her friends could get together and laugh and talk and argue. She named the restaurant in honor of Honoré Panisse, who was a sort of larger-than-life character in Marcel Pagnol's film trilogy, Marius, Fanny, and César. And Alice Waters actually named her daughter Fanny after that as well. So opening night was August 28th, 1971, and by all accounts, it was absolute chaos. As Jennifer mentioned, a designer once worked in the kitchen of Chez Panisse. And so really it was just at-home cooks, poets, dancers, philosophy majors. They all crowded into the kitchen at Chez Panisse, and eventually, over several hours, managed to serve 120 mostly patient diners. And this was the menu. Very simple, fixed menu, pâté. There was also a green salad that didn't make the menu. Canard aux olives, plum tart, coffee, and of course, wine. But the duck had never been frozen. right? It was bought fresh from a market in San Francisco's Chinatown. Most of the produce came from a nearby Japanese produce market or from the Berkeley Co-op, which is just across the street. And for the salad, the best she could get was romaine lettuce, and she basically threw away 3/4 of it anyway. She said, we did it differently, and it was doing differently that made it what it is. And that is essentially the Alice Waters revolution. Local, super high quality, seasonal, organic when possible, or ingredients. And you can call it farm to table, you can call it the organic revolution, you can call it the slow food movement, but it's really thanks to Waters that you can basically go into any town or city today and find a farmer's market or organic food in a local market. And if you go to a decent restaurant, it will tell you where your food came from. That also is a trademark from Chez Panisse' early days. And not much has changed since 1971. I think you can go to the next slide. Over the following years, Waters formed a network of more than 85 local farmers, ranchers, and dairies and fishermen to supply the restaurant. That's Bob Kennard in the top right-hand corner. He has been the main producer for Chez Panisse since 1971. Dozens of chefs and interns have trained at Chez Panisse over the years and went on to establish their own restaurants all over the country with the same or very similar philosophies. Chez Panisse still serves a set menu that changes daily and highlights seasonally available foods. And the cookbook that I used is organized not by course, so it's not starters, mains, desserts, it's organized by season. Right, by spring and by summer. What's available in spring? What sort of pasta can you create in the spring? What sort can you create in the summer if you plant her so-called pasta garden? Okay, why don't we watch the second clip of our video? Okay, so we have chopped all of our vegetables and we are ready to put this on the stove. We've melted 4 tablespoons of butter in our saucepan, and Naomi is going to add our vegetables to the pan. We have our scallions, our spring onions, yellow onions going in next, red onions, and leeks, shallot, and garlic. This is clearly an ode to the spring onion, right? Before anything else is growing. Okay, so we have sauteed our vegetables for a few minutes. They're looking pretty good. And now we will add some seasonings, some salt, some pepper, and some thyme. And then about 2.5 cups of, this is vegetable broth. The recipe calls for chicken broth. You could also make this vegan if you used olive oil or vegetable oil instead of butter. But we're making it vegetarian. So this is going to simmer for a few minutes while our pasta cooks. Okay, and this is fresh pasta, so it will only need about 4 or 5 minutes. Okay, so our pasta is ready to go. Our sauce is simmering away. So we're going to drain the pasta. And we're just going to toss that butter with the fresh pasta. So super simple recipe. It's really just about the fresh ingredients. And we will put our sauce on top. All right, lots of different colors. It smells really good. There we go, beautiful. Okay, now for the real test to see if the family likes it. All right, give it a taste test.
Here we go.
Does it pass the kid test? All right.
I don't really get a bite of the onions, but it passes.
Oh, that's good.
The pasta passes.
The pasta is fantastic. And then the filling, what do you call the other stuff?
Sauce.
The sauce is quite good.
Okay, so it passed the family test. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the early 1990s, I mentioned Alice Waters had a daughter, and her daughter was in school, and Waters sort of started going back to her activist roots, really. And so I want to just discuss 3 projects that she sort of launched. She's become quite well known for. So she was curious about what kids ate at school. And so Waters famously climbed into the school dumpster at her daughter's school, and what she found will not surprise any of the parents that are here this evening. She found wrappers from chips and candy and cookies and soda and juice, all highly processed and unnutritious foods. And so what was her response? She created the Edible Schoolyard project. It was founded in 1995 at a Berkeley middle school. And essentially, she calls it edible education from start to finish. School children plant the food, help it grow, nurture it, harvest it. They learn all about food and nutrition from it. So they cook it, they eat it, they study it, they talk about it, they serve it in their cafeteria. And for Waters, it's sort of the quintessential project in that it encourages good food, healthy food, and it creates a network of local farmers and environmental stewardship of the land. Today, there are more than 6,000 active edible schoolyards throughout the United States. Next, please. Also in the early 1990s, Waters began to urge then President Clinton to plant a garden at the White House to draw attention to health issues, mainly obesity, as well as environmental issues. Her wish was finally fulfilled in 2009 when the Obama administration, in tandem with Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, dedicated the garden. Now, it turned out that calling it an organic garden turned into a political nightmare. So it's not actually called the organic garden. It is just the White House garden. In any case, that garden now provides food for official events, as well as family dinners. No beets, apparently, because Barack Obama does not like beets. And it involves local school children in planting and growing and harvesting the food there as well. The last example here is from Monticello. So in 2011, Alice Waters visits Monticello. As Jeannie said, Jefferson was fascinated by different heirloom varietals, and Monticello is still known for producing these. And Alice Waters was very impressed walking around Monticello's garden. And then she visited the cafe. And by this point in the presentation, I hope you have a sense of her sort of insane energy. So you can probably predict what happened next. The cafe at Monticello was, of course, overwhelmingly stocked with ultra-processed packaged foods and racks of chips and salty snacks and all sorts of things like that, and a big Coca-Cola branded refrigerator. So true to form, Alice Waters had something to say about this situation. And so today, when you go to Monticello, you could perhaps try the seasonal tomato and okra stew that is inspired by the African influences in Virginia's cooking. There's an eggplant sandwich. Apparently, eggplant was one of Jefferson's favorite vegetables. There's a Monticello salad with his tarragon vinaigrette. Monticello hired a farmer who established an acre garden at Tufton Farm, which is a 650-acre property that's part of the original plantation. Today, 80% of the food served in the cafe is grown locally. In the summer and the fall, 35% of the produce is grown on site. And the cafe serves historical recipes like a chocolate cream, which is based on one of 2 surviving recipes from James Hemings, who was Jefferson's enslaved cook and the brother of Sally Hemings, the enslaved woman with whom Jefferson had 6 children. So the organic farm-to-table revolution began in the 60s, right? With Alice Waters, with Chez Panisse, and of course, it's part of a larger 60s emphasis on political and environmental movements as well. I thought we might give the last couple of minutes over to Alice Waters herself. Jonah, if you could play that last video.
How are we supposed to live our lives? How should we eat? How do the choices we make about food affect our fellow humans and the land that we live on? I think food just opens your senses and opens your mind. And it's an activity that we do every day. And it can really enrich your life, your everyday life. I thought I would make a confit of tomatoes. It's just tomatoes, garlic, basil, olive oil, salt and pepper. And the idea is that you can use the very, very ripe, overripe tomatoes to make it. With the olive oil and the garlic and the basil in the bottoms, you cook them very slowly for about an hour and a quarter. You can use it as a tomato sauce for just about anything. I use it for a pasta sauce. It has just this aroma and fragrance that comes from the long cooking. I think when you eat the same thing every day, it sort of dulls your senses. And so when something really good comes along, you miss it. And another experience about food is changing as the seasons are changing, and you're experiencing the whole range of different foods and tastes out there in the world, that you have a very different experience in your life. And it opens you up to seeing all kinds of things in a different way. That sort of hamburger experience is so narrow and just sort of narrows your thinking in all ways. It's not just about food. It's about
Okay, there you have it. It's not just about food, it's about everything.
Wow, that was absolutely a perfect way to end this series.
I know, should we go eat something? I'm really hungry.
I'm starving now. I'm really starving. I actually just think that summed up everything so well. I think we have about 10 minutes to take some questions, and Jonah is going to field those out of our chat. So for those of you in the audience, if you have questions for Victoria or Jeannie, go ahead and put them into the chat, and we'll see what they have to say.
Okay, our first two questions are from Dan McInerney, as is tradition. The first one was sent in the middle of the thing, so I have it written down on my phone. I didn't want to lose it in the chat. Jeannie, what is gelatine as opposed to gelatin?
Is that a typo? There was a couple typos in my PowerPoint. I don't know.
Fair enough. And then this one's for Victoria. Did Alice's sense of activism extend to the compensation she offered her suppliers and staff? Parentheses, hoping that's the case.
Yes, it did. I don't know exactly what her vacation policies and all of that sort of thing are, but yes, the Chez Panisse staff eats, lunch and dinner together every day and discusses the menu. And so it's a very collegial place to work. And she very intentionally brings in young people and interns, and does not hire people, not surprisingly, I guess, based on culinary experience. You don't have to go to culinary school to walk into Chez Panisse and ask for a job. You have to, she actually lists the job requirements, something like it's an open mind, a willingness to experiment, a willingness to work hard. So she clearly is open to sort of guiding and molding young chefs.
Okay, I think this next question is just going out to the field for either of you. This is from Tammy. I was just thinking about how important women have been to the series, especially in the last couple of episodes. Just wondering whether you think that these revolutions would have happened without Rose Knox and Alice Waters.
Jeannie, do you want to take that or not?
So the revolution wouldn't have happened without Rose Knox. I mean, there were other gelatin producers, and I would say, you know, the Jello the rise of Jello, as Victoria and as Jennifer has spoken about, as well as kind of the rise of the industrial kitchen. So it's really just kind of playing into that aspect. You know, Jello is interesting because it really played up the like feminine arts, as well as kind of as the food turned to like purity and cleanliness and orderliness. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that much about Rose Knox. I think she had a good hand in the Jello Revolution, and Knox Company itself. They really promoted it, World's Fair, and their recipes and their advertisements are pretty famous. So that really kind of popularized. So yeah, I think they had a hand in it, but I don't know if Jello would have emerged without them. Maybe it did. I mean, it is in all its glory.
For me, I think Waters sort of represents a movement, and she's remarkable in the amount of kind of single-minded energy that she has devoted to certain things that are important to her. And she just is one of those people that just doesn't let go of something when she is determined to do it. But I think she came out of a political and a social and a cultural moment that was taking shape and would have done so probably even without her. But I think she certainly took it in a particular direction.
I did love how ours circled back to Thomas Jefferson for both of us. So,
Jeannie, I don't know why Jello shots were founded in the 1950s. I mean, this is pre-baby boom wave of college attendees. Any knowledge about why Jello shots came about in the 1950s?
I don't know. There is someone who is credited with creating the Jello shots. I think it had to do with the military. So yeah, there is this interesting aspect of Jello, which is it's really like childlike. It really evokes childhood and fun and, you know, purity in Utah. You know, it's very clean, fun. And this also kind of like other aspects of it being party. And yeah, it's, you know, has kind of two aspects.
Maybe we lost Jonah.
Yeah, it's this is Tammy. Jonah just texted me he got thrown out. So
Oh no.
Uh-oh. Well,
I'm gonna pull up the fall stuff, and that way if we have any other questions we can pull them up. But I do want to tell people what we have planned.
can you see I can't see the other Q&A.
Yeah, I can. So Victoria, this is a question from Jamie about, could you talk a little about social class and Alice Waters' vision of unfussy cuisine and organic or local farming or whatever it has evolved into in a Whole Foods, say. And he says the leek shallot garlic pasta was delicious.
Oh, good. Yes, I did have some taste testers. Oh, Jonah seems to be back. If you know about Alice Waters, you probably know that she did in fact become sort of a political lightning rod for an elitist approach. And you probably remember the big arugula scandal surrounding the Obamas. So she has been sort of accused of, promoting this, an expensive elitist approach to food. And she argues back against that, by saying, if the organic food industry was supported in the same way that the industrial food industry has been supported over time, then, those prices would fall. And farmers markets are meant very specifically to counter that sort of elitist thing. You can use food stamps at most farmers markets these days. So you know, she has pushed back against that. And I think that in terms of access through regular supermarkets like Smith's or at farmers markets, and I think the broader that movement has become, there has been something of an equalizer. But I do think that organic food will continue to sort of be, you know, an elitist sort of political lightning rod in some ways.
But in some way, you know, you could see out of your window your own kitchen garden. So, you know, there are other inexpensive ways to manage it. And I do find that more and more people want to have their own kitchen garden. It's like a, you know, so.
And that would be her ideal, right? If we all grew a little bit of our own food, for sure.
Do we have any other questions, or do we want to put up the slide for the?
I think we are out of questions and it's time to move on.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jonah. Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us this year. We do plan to return in the fall, and we have a couple of cooks already lined up and ready to go. I'm waiting to see the dates. I think they're sometime in October and November. Yes. Okay. We have our 2 virtual events scheduled for October 28th. We'll have Dr. Susan Kogan from the History Department and Dr. Alexa Sand from Art History talking about medieval recipes. And then on November 18th, before everybody starts eating for Thanksgiving, we will have a pizza cook-off between Mark Damon and Dan McInerney, both of the History Department, thick versus thin. So you'll all have to eagerly await next fall when we will return. So thank you all for joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you then.